The following presentation on sustaining older persons, the sociology of aging, was given by Dr. Sandra Lee Samuels, Assistant Professor of Social Sciences at the University College of the Cayman Islands during Older Persons Month in 2018. The Department of Children and Family Services is airing this wide-ranging presentation to mark World Elder Abuse Awareness Day 2019 on Saturday, the 15th of June. The presentation covers various perspectives on aging and reflects on changing lifestyles, environmental influences, and emotions. At the Department of Children and Family Services, we believe that being educated on the aging process and the changing lifestyles of older persons can flag potential problems early and help prevent elder abuse.
Now, many older persons, especially as they get to the oldest old, they will experience what we call comorbidity. In other words, not just one thing wrong. So you might be diagnosed with diabetes, but you also have high blood pressure, thyroid acting hyper, and so on and so forth, maybe heart problems as well. And all of this is compounded before the death process. And what you find is that for many individuals, a spouse might be the individual who is going to be the caregiver, as well as we might rely on the hospital. But during this time, it can be really stressful to watch a loved one going, as it were. And the leading causes of death in older persons tend to be the heart, cancer, strokes as we call them, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, pneumonia, influenza, liver, and of course we know liver is coming from the alcohol down the road for many individuals, accidents, diabetes, and lastly, suicide. Now where suicide is concerned, for many of us, we tend to be politically correct where this is concerned. We just skip around it. But it is real, and we find that from time to time, even in our society, we have to deal with the hopelessness that individuals may feel. You have gotten a diagnosis and you feel like, oh, I realize that this is the end, and so on and so forth. And for many individuals, they claim that this is a way of dying with dignity. I don't know if there's dignity in that. I would think that at the end of the day, it is more of a selfish act if it's intentional. For some individuals, of course, we know that they get to this point and it could be medicated related, because if you listen to the news, you'll hear, oh, take this for this, but it increases, whatever. So we have to be very vigilant in terms of sustaining the older person to see behavior patterns, what's changing, how are they reacting, and so on and so forth. It is said that men over 85 tend to be in the highest category in terms of suicide. Because what you find, I don't know if it's because women, we really don't have to know you, but you know what? I tell a stranger my problem and I'm gone because it's off my back. Women will do that, but men tend to hold it on the inside. And as a result, what you find is that they're not really sharing, and it can lead to mental health problems. Now, ageism also is a trigger for mental health issues, because what you'll find is that for many individuals, diagnosis, as I said before, is it dementia or is it depression? We have to find out exactly what's happening. And we have to be vigilant. We have to ask the hard questions, okay? Deciding on a place of death, that's another thing. Do we stay at home? Is it possible? Do we need hospice care? Or will we need hospital care? That's also a decision that we have to make. And for many individuals, we shy away from these decisions, but I think once you're cognitively able, you should have these discussions with individuals. I'd rather stay home. Or if it's really terminal and I really, really need to be in the hospital, then so be it, or whatever. These are areas that we really need to talk about. Then there's the issue of death, which is final. We're saying goodbye, and culture dictates how we say goodbye. And of course, for many of us, there are rituals that we carry out, and it gives us closure. It gives us a chance to say goodbye. It also gives us a chance to remember the individual and to think about the good times, so that we basically keep them in mind, so to speak, although physically they might not be with us. Thanatologists are individuals who study death and dying, and they have dedicated their time to it. And what they find is that we really need death education, because many individuals refuse to talk about death. And as a result, they're not prepared. And it comes, and bereavement as well as grief becomes problematic. Now, there's a difference. We talk about bereavement, and for many of us, we think that it's the same as grief. It's just the acknowledgement that somebody has died. I'm bereaved. Grief is actually my emotional response to this. And of course, the grief can go on for many years, and it can be prolonged until it becomes really problematic and lead to mental problems as well. Now, many individuals should know about Kubler-Ross. She says that we go through 5 stages where death is concerned. And of course, this is not linear. So what you find is that you may have a denial depending on where you are, if it's unexpected. We have anger if a person is too young and we think that it's unfair. You know, we might start there. We have bargaining, where we're actually trying to buy some more time from any source we can. And we also have acceptance. And for many individuals, depression before acceptance. Now, depression, many individuals can stay there for a long time, and this is when grieving becomes problematic. Okay? All right, so philosophical, we're looking at personal meaning, we're looking at spirituality, values, ethics, and it is said that older persons are triggered into a life review, and we tend to recall through what we call a Pollyann principle, because we tend to look at the best things in life at this point. Now, for some individuals, if you're in despair, then you might be looking at those negative things, and your life review might be one that sends you into more depression. So if we're keeping it positive, what we find is that we can make amends. Maybe there's a fence that we need to mend, you know, somebody who we have not spoken to for a long time, we're holding grudges and so on and so forth. Conflicts can be resolved during this time as we do our review. And also it gives us a sense of sharing and a feeling of being connected to others as well as we do our review. And this is why, for many of us, if you visit someone who is in the older or oldest old, these individuals want to tell you their story. And we should listen, because it's good for them to do the review. It's a part of the process, yes. If you don't have time, don't visit. That's what I usually say. Make the time so that at the end of the day, you can listen to the stories. Now, in terms of religion and spirituality, many individuals do not want to speak about this, but what research has found is that many persons or participants actually says that it's religion and spirituality that is helping them through the aging process. It is a very key component in terms of finding hope, you know, and of course those are my definitions. Finding hope, finding peace, being able to find meaning as well in general, and so on. Now, in terms of finding meaning, for many of us, we have to look at a social convoy, layers of individuals, friends, family, and so on, associates, keep in touch. We also have to look at continuity, where yes, I used to be there, but I'm here now, and I'll make peace with where I am, okay? Transcendence, where we are actually moving beyond the aging process, and we're actually looking at valuing the roles that we can now do and involve ourselves in activities that we can. And we also have the transcendent self, where we are experiencing the individual ego and this is where we kind of have a sense of who we are and make peace with that authentic self, and also use wisdom as we prepare for death. Okay, so sustaining, quickly. As I said before, sustaining means to strengthen, to support, and so on, to maintain and improve, yes? And there are some predictors that we can look at for longevity. Genetic predisposition, of course, many scientists are trying to see if they can find a longevity gene, because for some family and ethnicity, it is prolonged, and these individuals will go over 100 and they keep going. And of course, they want to see if there is a genetic component or a marker that they can identify that contributes to longevity. Of course, we know that we have to maintain the ideal weight as we go on with our height. That's very important. Watch our blood pressure, cholesterol, coping with stress, as I said before, very important. No smoking, we should try to avoid that, because at the end of the day, your respiratory system will thank you, as well as the rest of your body. Excessive alcohol, diet has to change. Your body will indicate. Many times it will tell you what it wants and what it will not touch, but we do not listen sometimes. Exercise, of course, and I will say moderation, because you have to know your limits. So if you have to sit in a chair and just do your arms and do your legs while sitting, at least you're exercising, okay? Relax and positive outlook in life, that's very important. Safe sexual practices, and I have to talk about that because many individuals will not even be able to call some of the STIs that we are encountering now, okay? So it simply means that you have to be practical and you have to be aware of what is happening, and one have to look beyond the pleasure. There's also mental health, so we have to think about ways of being calm and dealing with our stress and not allowing it to escalate. Now, for us to sustain the older person, we have to think about an interdisciplinary approach where everyone basically is required. And I'm not going to touch into Miss Carlin's area, so I won't elaborate, but it is our duty as a community, everyone. In psychology, community psychology especially, we have what we call levels of analysis. In other words, we're not just aiming our policies at the individual, but we are also looking at their microsystems and tapping into those areas to see what resources are already available, how they're using them, what can we do to help, where they are and where you want them to be. And we also have the macro, which would be more distal, but also indirectly impacting older persons. Now, we know that interpersonal relationship is at the heart of everything, so I have to talk about that, as I said before. Listen to the stories. We also want to provide emotional support, help in the time of need. So program your number and let it be number 1 if you're the emergency person, so that nobody will have to dial, yeah? Trust and confide. Actually, we need somebody to say, I have a little money in the wardrobe, yeah? And I'm going to trust you with that. So if anything happens and I have to go to the hospital, that's where it is, right? So we want to be able to trust those individuals. Share our stories. We want somebody to be able to stand up for us, because as we said before, there is maltreatment. And if you realize on somebody you might be, it is a form of domestic violence. It is. And at the end of the day, if you realize that something might be happening, do not just listen to the person that, oh, I walked into the door or I fell. You want to find out. Tell me the story. And after they have said that over and over, you'll find the truth. Also show tolerance. Many individuals who are maltreated, they're maltreated because we're impatient. We do not understand where they are in the journey, so we have not educated ourselves. We do not understand what's happening to them in terms of their diagnosis, and we lose patience. And as a result, we're not tolerant, so we have to show that. Repay your debts and your favors, because there are many individuals who have contributed to your lives. Parents who have sent you to college, they did not get that education. Teachers who have helped you along the way. Sometimes it's just hello. Doesn't have to be financial. Because I remember 2 semesters after having students in my class, she was asking me, Miss, do you work here? And I said, seriously, child? I remember you as my student. Why is it that you do not remember me as your teacher, you know? So we tend to do these superficial things. We need to move away from that, where we actually repay the debts. And it does not have to be financial. Just be there and strive to create happiness rather than dismay among others. Now, within each of us, we contribute to a school of thought in terms of the aging process. And as I go through them quickly, you can decide where you fall. So there is a structural to functional approach, and it says that as we age, so as to maintain order in society, we need to step aside. Huh? It's a part of the succession. So that's a school of thought. We have the disengagement. And this is a little kinder because it says gradually step aside. We don't want you to just make a big one, just gradually do it, okay? Then we have the activity which says that we're going to put up some social barriers for you, but we expect you to kind of get involved still, yeah? We have the symbolic to interaction approach, and this is more contextual because we're looking at what it means to be old to us and how we treat those individuals. We have the social to conflict, and this is where we look at inequalities and how resources are actually shared and what is happening in terms of access. We also have the socio-emotional selectivity theory, and this emphasizes, you know, social contact. We should ensure that as individuals, we're not lonely and isolated. So there should be some contact as we go through the aging process. Now, continuity is a favored approach because where this is concerned, it provides a compromise position, and it says that as long as you're able, you should continue to participate and you should remain engaged in all that is happening. And for many individuals, this is really the school of thought that they contribute to as you get older. We might not be there yet, but we know that eventually we will. I also think that if we're doing interventions, we must think about all the areas. Many of us are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, and we can use that as the basis. So if we go to look for someone, we can ask them, are your biological needs being met? You have food, you have water. How's the fresh air in here? We could probably open a window and let in some fresh air, yeah? We need to do that. We also look at shelter and warmth and what's happening with these individuals. We can look at safety. The locks on the doors probably need changing and so on and so forth. Is there policing in that community? Belonging and love, and that's where we'd come in to make sure that we give it unconditionally. We also need to look at the cognitive needs, and we can encourage these individuals to be lifelong learners. In other words, you don't have to do an entire degree, but take a course here and there, or do something online so as to keep the neurons going, yes? We have aesthetic needs, where we can beautify, and this is where sometimes we tend to forget the form when we move our older persons from their familiar places. Can we recreate their room so that there is familiarity? That's very important. Sometimes we move them without even thinking about what they treasure and what might be important and how they find beauty and form. That's important. They also have goals that they still need to achieve, and we need to ask about them. What would you like to do? Is there anything that you really want to achieve? And then lastly, transcendence. Involve them in your everyday activity. So you're baking a pudding, put your mom in the kitchen and say, so what do I put in next? Even if you have the recipe because you want to keep this going, yeah? And all the activities, if they are very good at, let's say, playing the piano, you could ask them, teach me. And at least that is allowing them to keep these skills going as well. And of course, aspects of spirituality. It is said that the greatest number of individuals within the religious institutions are the older persons. But as many individuals become oldest old, what you'll find is that they're not able to go to their places of worship. So for many of us, we can go and sing a hymn with them as well, and prayer and so on. That's very important at the end of the day. Second to last slide, I'm almost wrapping up. I have to talk about the caregiver stress, because sometimes we emphasize on the giving, but we also have to take care. If you're on a flight, they tell you put your oxygen mask on before you try to help anyone. So we really need to take care of ourselves. For many of us, we become paraprofessionals in terms of taking care of others, because we have to educate ourselves in terms of taking care. And many of us might not be able to employ professionals to help. And as a result, it means then that we have to take care of ourselves. Take some break. Have a schedule, especially if the family is really populated, optimally populated. You want to make sure that you make a schedule and have individuals relieve as you go along. And if it's underpopulated, utilize your friends and members from community and so on who can help. So, in closing, in sustaining older persons, it is said that we get so old so quickly, and then we get wise so late, because for many of us, as we get old, we feel, you know what, if I could just get back some years, I would not have done that, and so on. We have to develop our philosophy of life. We have to ask ourselves, not just of life, but also of death. What do we think about it? How should we prepare for it? Should we just make a living will so that someone has a proxy or whatever? Or should we be looking beyond death? What do we think about what is happening beyond death? For many individuals, that is not settled. And these are questions that we have to ask ourselves, and how we will face all of these changes. Develop a sense of humor, because you have some friends and you can talk about what's going on and the changes, and nobody told me about this, yeah? And you laugh about it, because if you take it too serious, you won't get through it, okay? Now, policies come and they go, but I think as a community we need to develop principles, because those principles remain unchanging and they help us to maintain integrity. In other words, if we're doing it intrinsically, then we don't have to look externally for those things that might be rewarding, okay? It is said that you're as old as your latest dream. Dreams empower us. Have some plan. In other words, if you tell your brain you're dying, it will believe you, and it will start shutting down as well. Remember also that today you might be the provider, tomorrow you might be the recipient. And as a result, we have to do unto others as we would have done to us. And lastly, do not make a bucket list, make a promise list. Because if you make a bucket list, it means that you're planning for death. If you make a promise list, these are things that you need to do, so it will motivate and empower you to live instead of focusing on death. Okay? Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.